Something moves in the mists. Something sinister. Thorn.
With 2023 closing its door, we're going to make yet another year in review video that you guys liked so much last year and talk about all the stuff that we've done this year. We are going to include Affliction League, even though it's just started. It's got a pretty solid start so far and been having a lot of fun. But yeah, even though it's just in December, it will be in this. Gotta remember, most of it is still ahead of us, and maybe we'll see some even more like updates or changes to the league. But let's start off talking about Sanctum. A leftover from 2022, Sanctum League started with a strong reception and became even better as time went on. For the first time ever, we saw mid-league additions, and that made the league mechanic deeper and gave us a really amazing chase. And unique relics gave us access to challenge runs, new ways to test your character, and incites you to create specialized characters. We got new amazing unique items that break the game by giving us new builds. Sandstorm Massage, Eternal Damnation, the Balance of Terror, and Original Sin all gave us potent upgrades. Especially with Original Sin being a new tier 0 chase unique that is insanely powerful but extremely hard to get. And Sanctified Relics brought an entirely new gear slot, a permanent boost to your character's power. And another thing that was never seen before is that they were soulbound. You can't trade these with other people, and that's generally not something we see in Path of Exile. That means that if you wanted a specific stat line or a passive tree keystone for your character, you had to farm it out in Sanctum. That was a very polarizing change that a lot of people, like me, loved, but a lot of people didn't. And it was a very experimental addition. We've not really seen account-bound items ever since. Now, I particularly love that myself because that's sort of how I play the game in general, where I let what I find dictate what I'm going to play. So I absolutely love this. And when something is soulbound and can't be traded freely, they can be even more powerful than if they can. We see that a little bit now with the charms, where the Sanctified Relics ended up being more powerful. Sanctum also introduced an entirely new alternative endgame, although with the downside that you could only store a fourth of a full run, so you couldn't spend all your time running Sanctum with a dedicated character. This league mechanic was so different from the way we usually play Path of Exile that it became a very polarizing presence in the game. A lot of people loved it, but a lot of other people didn't. And a big reason for that was that your character basically needed to be able to do Sanctum or it felt like a waste. And because Exiles have to play the game in an extremely different manner, that confused some new players and alienated those who like to passively defend against enemies. The defense built on your character largely didn't matter, and it's all about how well you navigate and position in gameplay, and that made it really hard for some players, especially slower ones, to do builds like Bone Shatter, etc. Now, very importantly, the old iteration of Arch Nemesis rares was removed in this patch, or at least made a lot better where a lot of people felt like they were gone, marking the introduction of the current rares we have in the game right now. For me, Sanctum was an absolute blast. Honestly, it probably gets a 9 out of 10. I played Bro SF, which we're doing this league again with Steel Mage, and honestly, it is a very big part just to everything that happens during the league, everything you find, etc. But I just had such a blast during Sanctum. Looking back on it, it was one of my favorite leagues. It probably was my favorite league. 9 out of 10. Crucible. Oh boy. Crucible was a absolute mess at the start. There was a lot of like clunky things, a lot of I didn't like how you interact with the league mechanic. The monsters were insanely overtuned. Oh! Well, at least that was funny. In these forges that spawned in every area, you could add small passive trees on your weapon and shield to add crazy new and old modifiers. That gave us access to never seen before power on weapons and builds that had the potential to break the game. And it did. Using the Crucible felt extremely random, even though later we came up with strategies for trying to deterministically do this. It was pretty painful. And that led to people chasing after extremely specific modifiers on specific base types, literally spending dozens and dozens of clicks to chance orb their items into uniques. Sorry, Captain Lance. Crucible didn't bring a great deal of change into Path of Exile, and while we did have some unique and new builds spawning from the mechanic, we also didn't see any huge meaningful content to test those builds against. It also spawned one of the most degenerate builds ever. The Totem Explode build, just absolutely insane. Particularly not so much because of what it could do, but for how cheap it was to do it. Some streamers even refused to play this build because it felt like cheating. Not me though, I was one-shotting Ubers. In the same patch, TGD also introduced the Atlas gateways to the Atlas tree, giving us even more customizability for the endgame. Breach, Abyss, and Pathfinder, Saboteur all of these were reworked into their current state. I was particularly surprised with Pathfinder because we thought that was getting nerfed, not buffed. Two other greatly criticized changes were the fact that we got an official boss kill race in Ruthless as opposed to for the normal game modes, and patch notes that on top of being very slim was a lot of nerfs to player power and defense, as well as other changes that made leveling more difficult, like removing flat damage to spells and wand recipe. And this was made a lot because of the Exile Con race, which felt a little bit crazy to change the game for so few people. Overall, it wasn't super popular or an amazing time for the game, and GDD kinda needed to pivot. In hindsight, I did still enjoy Crucible quite a lot, and I think I have enjoyed the base game quite a lot since Calandra. It's just been getting better and better. As a league, I actually think it might be the worst like interaction with the league mechanic. Like rewards aside, just sitting there clicking the button and channeling, that was absolutely awful. I might give the league a 5 or a 6, but obviously the game is still in a base state of being really high. It's a hard one to rate. Pretty bad league, but I did have a lot of fun playing it. Next up after Crucible, they really had to come out with a banger league. And we got Toda, which is a very polarizing league, but for me it was probably my second or third favorite league ever. Just an absolute blast, and wow, tattoos were so cool. So my first impression of the league was actually terrible. I remember posting that Inception meme of saying, wow, this little maneuver is going to set us back 50 years. And that's because I tried doing the league mechanic while I was in Act 2. And it wasn't really scaled for that. So I had no damage. I was dying repeatedly. I was getting spawn camped. And I think I'd ended up doing 2 rounds. Took me like 15 to 20 minutes. So while I was in Act 2, all my friends were suddenly in Act 4. And I was like, wow, that really set me back. I hate this league mechanic. Now, I quickly started noticing that the more I was doing it and later on in maps, I was like, ooh, this is fun. Ooh, I'm rank 1 in the entire league. And yeah, in Toda, you literally die and then reincarnate into an alternative game mode where you build a team. So this is based on games like Teamfight Tactics, etc. You have barely functioning idiots and they attack the opposing elite gaming warlords that will shatter your skull into pieces. Almost. Oh! The good thing it's a softcore league mechanic. Jokes aside, the frustrations of the Toda game were immediately apparent, and it took a while for a lot of people to warm up to it. There ended up being a lot of cheese builds and stuff like that, and the first build I played was kinda cheesing it, because it was Explosive Arrow Champion, and the taunt made the enemies just run towards your totems. Toda was really fascinating though. You couldn't die, making it very chill and relaxing, and I really appreciate that. It's something RuneScape does really well, that even if you're playing RuneScape on hardcore, if you don't want to die, you don't have to. There are safe things in RuneScape you can do that there is absolutely zero risk of you dying, and Toda is the same thing in Path of Exile. There's also very powerful currency and exclusive item farming, and they did tune the rewards a lot, but eventually just made it really good. And the most insane thing of Toda was the tattoos, which honestly might have been my second favorite addition to the game. Only the Recombinators were better, which we had last year. And tattoos gave you so much customizability over your characters where you could choose exactly what you wanted to do, and I just loved it. Giving a large amount of agency, and there were defensive tattoos, offensive tattoos, build enabling tattoos, just utility ones, and so much more. And it was a great build to make new builds, upgrade existing builds, and just break the game in general. Some insane tattoos could give you things like permanent onslaught, +1 gems, turn you to 90 max stress easily, just so much to do. The Toda game mode itself though was very polarizing. A lot of people enjoyed the laid back chill grind. Some people felt like it was invalidating getting high level on hardcore because you could do it and get like high level pretty safe. However, it was very slow. I thought that was a bit of a silly argument because it was so slow to level. If you get level 95 in Toda, you deserve it. Speaking of builds though, we had yet another game mode to make builds for. Sanctum is now back in full effect, and you can buy them off other players. Now, they did remove the sanctified relics because they are doing quite a lot of borrowed power, which is probably healthy for the game. But this introduces a new way of farming currency and enjoying the game in a different manner. And we got to keep a lot of the cool uniques. And one of the coolest things for me, this let us actually try doing Original Sin again, which in Sanctum League I'd failed on because we were playing Bro SF and I didn't get that many tries on it. However, now I could make an even more powerful build and actually try. And after a very unfair death, I managed it. Oh my god, I did it. Oh my god, I did it. And I did 3 or 4 no-hit runs, and I was doing service runs for other players. And on hardcore, it's kind of sketchy to make this rippy a character because if you do get one shot in Sanctum, you still die and lose your character. So going the absolute insane glass cannons in softcore isn't as reasonable. Other notable changes this patch were continuous additions to the Atlas passive tree, which remains one of the best, if not the best, addition to the game. And we got returning projectiles, which gave a lot of easy projectile builds, even though we basically had an anoint that did that before. Another important thing to talk about was the lack of changes in patch notes and overall game balance. All of it got really overshadowed by the amount of customizability and viability that Tota offered. But we did struggle this year by having very boring league starters where there wasn't that much choice, and I do think that the end game ended up being quite different, but for both like short-term racing and league starters, it was pretty stale. Guardian got reworked into the powerhouse that it currently is, and Chieftain got reworked into poor man's melding of flesh. And not doing another Ruthless race, GGD ran an official Hardcore SSF boss kill event, so thanks for listening to all our crying. Tota was just an absolute blast. It was really hard to decide for me. Like, I instantly knew that it was top 3 for me, and I had so much fun. It was really fun playing Hardcore Trade, and I ended up talking to and doing stuff with really cool people, and just, it was so nice. Honestly, like, Tota might even be tied for first for me because it has Sanctum in it. I did really like the Sanctified Relics, but the agency we got from Tattoos was so nice. I played, I think it was 700 hours. 700 or 800 hours, which is pretty much peak for me lately. I'm getting old, so I'm not playing 1200 hours a league like I used to. Honestly, Tota maybe deserves a 10 out of 10. I had so much fun, but yeah, the league mechanic was kind of whatever. It's just the base state being so good. It's a tough one to rate because it's so hard to separate the league mechanic and the base game. And I still did enjoy Tota, just, you know, not as much as Sanctum. And this league had Sanctum in it, so it's a tough one. It might actually be my favorite league. It's just, I don't even know anymore. But it's definitely between this and Sanctum.
Something moves in the mists.
And that leaves us at the current league, Affliction, which we got so many sweeping changes to the game. It's insane, and the base game is still in an insane state, which is really good. And to be quite frank, Diablo 4 did make me enjoy Path of Exile more, while I still do enjoy D4 and I will continue to have fun with that for some hours per reset. Just the amount of things we get in Path of Exile is staggering by comparison, and how many updates they do with a smaller team and a smaller budget. First, let's talk about the Transfigured Gems. We got so many new build choices and so many new things that we can do. It's absolutely insane, and we even had a lot of experimental league starters, and so many of the T-Gems are being used, and we're seeing crazy builds, some that are completely broken. But we haven't seen any nerfs so far. I wouldn't be surprised if some are coming, but either way, it does seem like they're pretty content with to let us play around with things. We're only a couple of weeks into 323, but so far it's been a very successful league. Every time I ask my chat to rate it, I see so many people rating it anywhere from a 7 to 10. It does have a big downside of not including an endgame expansion, as we've been with Siege of the Atlas for 2 years now. Obviously, we did have the Ubers around a year ago. However, getting so many new tools, but nothing to grind our teeth on, so to speak, has been a little sad for me. In spite of that though, Affliction has been a source of endless possibilities when it comes to new builds. We see so many streamers and myself just constantly feeling like, oh, let's pivot. Some people are calling it pivot league. It's like we see something else, we're like, oh, I really want to try that. And there's so many reasons to play different builds, new strategies, new ways to die. And it's been really nice to see that it's not all detonate dead like before. Even though that'll still probably be the case for some races, we do have really strong things like Arc, most likely beating anything else right now. It's also been such a lot of fun with the charms, and honestly, like the Warlock is maybe a little underused, even though it is very strong for things like Arc, etc. But both the Primalist and the whatever the other one, the Magi is called, are super strong, and both of them are really used. Primalist feels especially rewarding when you can actually get really good charms. That being said, I absolutely hate being in the Wildwood, the league mechanic itself. I get stuck on things. I hate running into dead ends. There's no minimap, which honestly is one of my least favorite things. And part of the reason I don't like Diablo 4 is the lack of a minimap. It's just like how I like to navigate. So I really hate the Wildwood part. Obviously, I'm doing magic finding with my friend Steel Mage right now, and it feels incredible with the amount of like magic find and quantity and everything it's adding, and so good rewards for the league. But I absolutely despise the league mechanic itself, and it was crazy overtuned. I would probably give being inside the Wildwood a 3 out of 10 and everything else about the league a 10 out of 10. Like the rewards and everything like that. And there are fun aspects to it, but I get so frustrated and I have constant PTSD that I'm like running past the I don't know what to call him, the Dark Seer or whatever he's called, that gives you the crazy rewards, has this chance to sell you mage blood, etc. But you have to find him and actually hover over him to see him, and then there's no real notification that you found him. So I'm always worried that I'm running past him. Probably some people are watching this and being like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And on top of that, farming the king, even when you are using strategies to try to help find him easier, it's still a pain and very random. But while the Affliction mechanic itself has some frustrating pain points for me, still an amazing league. I'm having so much fun. I'm playing Bro SF with Steel Mage once again on hardcore, and just so good. I see myself playing this quite a lot. I also don't have any variety planned that I really want to do, so quite a lot of PoE. I would probably give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. A really, really strong league, having a lot of fun. And again, the base game is just in such a good state that even if a league was straight up bad and terrible, I think I would still enjoy the game in the current state. 2023 was a very strong year for PoE, and we had an Exile Con, we have a bright future, good leagues, and I think the only thing that I really would have liked to see more of in the current year would have been new bosses and things like that. I do hope that in 24, pretty early, ideally in the first league, we get a new boss set, like something like the Conquerors, etc. That is the #1 thing missing for the game. But either way, if this is the kind of stuff we're going to be getting, Path of Exile has a bright future. I hope you liked my year in review. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being part of our content and everything we do. Sub if you liked the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.